All right, so last time we talked about the codes that we wrote. This time, we're going to proceed and concentrate on another part of Mongoose. So here we have used Mongoose for connecting to our database, but this time we're going to use it to create a new collection of data inside that database. So as you might be able to understand from the name, in this project, we're going to create a collection of students. So a bunch of students are going to be stored inside of our database. All right, well, maybe not the students themselves, but you get my drift. So in fact, this is going to be the main objective of our app here. So after that, we're going to write test files just to be sure that we can create new records inside the database and read, write, and update. You remember CRUD. So if we want to add a new collection of students, we're going to have to know a little bit more about Mongoose, yeah? In fact, I just happen to have right here in my pocket a diagram. And this is going to help us to see what's going on here. So on the left, here's the student's model. Mongoose is used to create models representing a record in a collection. So the student model represents all the records in the student collection, and we're going to create it in a minute. But our database has a collection of students. Now, although it seems singular, it represents the entire collection of students since it has a bunch of functions, right? Now, it's also going to be used to create objects representing instances or single records within the collections. So here we have a single record representing a student with names, okay? Here, we have a student model on the left, and on the right, user instances representing single records in the collection. Now, another critical thing about the student models is that they have a property called schema, as you can see. So it'll tell what properties that we expect from the records in the collection to have and what type of data it is. Right, so you can understand perhaps that I want every student to have a name, and these names should be a string of Jason or John or Rosa, whatever. I don't expect a name with numbers or an array or an object, in fact. Oh, and by the way, you can see from the document what types of properties you can add in our schema. Okay, so now it's time to create a new file in our project. And we will make it inside the source directory because it's going to have implementation details for the project. So that means we'll create a new student model. So if you go back to your code editor, we're going to make a new file called student.js inside the source directory. Then inside of this, we will define the student model and use it inside all test files that we're going to create in time, not right now. Now we've got to require in the Mongoose library. So every time that we work with any data inside of Mongo, we need to import the Mongoose library or require it at the top. Then I'll pull a specific property of the Mongoose object, and I'll put const schema equals mongoose.schema. Now on the left, the schema allows us to create a schema for our user model. And as we've already seen, it gives what we expect from our model. So now we're going to create a new schema for the student. And even though it may seem like it's so simple, why couldn't I just do this on my own? Stick with it. In time, it's going to be a lot more complex. So for now, I'm just going to create a schema and then assign it to the variable student schema by writing const student schema equals new schema. I will pass an object into this, and it will configure the schema. Now, I think as I already mentioned, I expect that all my students will have a name, and names will be a string. We can also add maybe a student number. So that'll have a number here. But for now, we don't need it. All right, so this is a special variable, and it's not particular to Mongo or Mongoose. In fact, all JavaScript implementations have access to this. Okay, so now we have created a student schema with name. So schema is just a small element of a student model, while student model represents the entire collection. You follow? Cool. So schema only says what properties we expect in the model. All right, so now that we've created our schema, it's time to create the student model. So write const student equals mongoose.model, and we'll name it with string student. Well, student schema as the second argument. And after that, Mongoose asks Mongo whether or not it's got a collection called student. No? Okay, then I'm going to create it. So this controls how the collection is called inside of Mongo. Now, just to refresh your memory, Mongoose is like a wrapper around the Mongo library and the database, right? So that's how it makes things easier. So basically, by doing it this way, we don't need to go to Mongo and create a new collection of students. Instead, Mongoose does all of this automatically. The second argument here, student schema, tells Mongoose about the schema that we expect this collection of students will pursue. Cool. So in the end, we just assign the result to student. So it's now a student class along with the student model. So now I just want to be sure that every file inside the application get access to the student model if it requires it. So for that, I'll write module.export equals student. See, so now any file inside this project trying to require this student.js file will get the reference to the student model. Now, keep in mind that every other file that you'll create will have a similar structure, even though we will add extra things inside of this. All right. So in other words, I mean that there will be import statements at the top, then create the schema, create the model, and then lastly, export them all on the bottom. All right. So I think after all that, we are ready to test with Mocha.